Welcome to another 10,000 Minority Appraisers Foundation podcast. Today, 10KMA founder and CEO Thaddaus Dawson is joined by economist and author William Michael Cunningham and real estate broker, appraiser, and author Shonnie, Alridge, along with today's special guest, nationally recognized authority in appraisal data science, Mr. George Dell. Today's topic, solving appraisal bias through data science and market analysis.
I'd like to thank you all for being here today to the 10K MA podcast. I'm really excited. Today's episode, eliminating appraisal bias with data science, with the godfather of data science and evidence-based, data-driven market analysis, Mr. George Dell. I'm gonna try not to fanboy out too much between George Dell, my regular co-host Michael Cunningham, and Miss Shonnie Alridge, my own personal heroes. We've been getting a lot of feedback from you all, and the feedback has been saying for me and Bill to talk less and give Shonnie more camera because she's better than both of us, better looking than both of us put together.
No question.
We kind of hog the spotlight there, so we're definitely going to make sure that happens today. And I'm really excited about George Dell, and I took George's class, Stats and Graphs 1, a couple of years ago, and he's been beating the drum for data science and updating the appraisal model and market analysis probably for the last 20, 25 years. He's just at the forefront and a true thought leader. There's a lot of people that are coming on the scene now trying to utilize what he's taught them, and now they're the experts. But I'd rather go to the original expert instead of all the knockoffs and the clones. And I just appreciate what he teaches and how he teaches and the circles of support that he creates. And so what my goal is today is to, after George presents, is for Shonnie to speak about market analysis from a brokerage and appraisal standpoint, and how helpful it is for her, and also for Bill to weigh in from an economist standpoint and how important it is in that space as well. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and shut up and turn it over to the godfather of data science and evidence-based data-driven market analysis, and my own personal hero, George Dell.
Well, thank you, Thaddaus. You'll need to let me share my screen. As you know, I'm totally addicted to PowerPoint and computer stuff. Science is my basic class. I'm George Dell. Valuemetrics.info is my education arm, and georgedell.com. Everybody should sign up for that. It's a free website. We give away free software, free stuff, free advice, psychological and otherwise, and some webinars and a weekly blog that we've been doing for for 6 years now without missing. We also support the community of asset analysts, and I'll go through this fairly quickly. A lot of stuff changing on time adjustments and market analysis. FHFA has come up with 3 different papers on the topic. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac just 2 weeks ago announced their new requirements for time adjustments. That'll be effective February 4th, as I recall. So just a lot of change on difficult topics. So the GSEs, Fannie and Freddie, will be requiring time adjustments. Appraisal standards have always said the appraiser must avoid assumptions about market trends. And FHFA report, especially the recent one, which was long and thorough, basically pointed out that only about 10% of appraisers were even using time adjustments, and they were using them as a fudge factor. I'm trying to condense this down. And they found some correlations between time adjustments, failure to do time adjustments, and the size of time adjustments to literally racial issues. So that's the strong connection there. Written by a couple of economists. It seemed academically pretty good stuff to me. Pointed out that most appraisers have avoided time adjustment, use the fudge factor, and use it when needed. Like if you don't come in with a high enough number to suit the the borrower or the lender, then they will do a time adjustment in upward markets. A lot of boilerplate excuses for not using it. So per the Fannie Mae guidelines, which were changed just 2 weeks ago, but it does say specifically, trends must reflect those properties deemed to be competitive. And it also says that all the properties within the neighborhood would be reflected in the trends section. The keywords there are competitive, not the neighborhood, not all the properties, not condos and 2 to 4 units and gas stations. Got to be just competitive to your specific property type. And you got to use all, not 3 or 7, all the relevant competitive properties. So what's the difference between evidence-based valuation and opinion-based valuation? Well, that's kind of what we teach, and what hopefully will provide us an objective manner getting to value, which will be bias-free or substantially reduce the opportunity to be biased. Really, good analysis won't be biased right from the beginning. And time adjustments or market trend analysis is really where the big break comes between the old ways of doing things and the new way of doing things. The old way of doing things was you pick 3 comps and make adjustments. The new way is you identify all the competitive data segment and apply predictive algorithms. And there's only 3 of them. So it's actually simpler in many ways. It gets rid of all the garbage discussions. Judgment is still needed from appraisers, but it's more refined and more specific and clearly identified, moving towards a reproducible appraisal product. Market conditions is data-driven, not opinion-driven. And if it's done properly, well, I'll use the word eliminates bias. It can substantially eliminate or preclude bias, or certainly makes it clearer to find if it's there. We divorce analytical bias from personal bias. This has been really my main argument, is until we know what kind of bias we're talking about, we're talking past each other. So analytical bias, and I'm sure the economist on the call here will recognize the difference between analytical bias and personal bias. They're completely different. But if the analytical process enables personal bias, it's not a good analytical process. And the other side of this coin is that it protects those appraisers who are ethical from being sued unreasonably. So it really brings to the middle where we can talk to each other rather than just be accusing each other of issues. I mentioned the word judgment. Well, very simply, there's judgment involved in price indexing, and it's pretty simple. Span, how far back do you go for your oldest comp? The trend, visualize it with a scatter plot, simple regression, puts a trend line on that. It can be a straight line or a curved line. A human being is needed to identify outliers, to identify them, find them, and deal with them. So you have to figure out why an outlier is. And sometimes an outlier can actually be your most important data point. It pretty much takes a human being to handle that, an expert. And finally, trend change. The Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac discussion points out that trends change in the middle of a year and a half. Well, ways of detecting those changes and revising the smoother, the trend line, these are the 4 major judgments that are involved with price indexing. They're not hard. After an appraiser's done 3 or 4 or 5 of them, it really doesn't take long at all. Before I'm done here, I'm going to do a price index using R. And in 9 seconds, we're going to show you how to do a price index. So that's me. And I'm going to slip through this because you've seen that all already. Market price indexing. Why market price indexing? It focuses on getting the right data, doing market analysis, and time adjustments. How do we do market price indexing? It's performed with a scatter plot and a simple regression. I'll show you an example of that here in just a couple of minutes. We use a repeatable, reproducible R algorithm because it is fast and reliable, and it can be audited instead of opinion reviewed. There's a huge difference between an analytic audit and an opinion review. When do we apply market price indexing? It's done early in the analysis. As soon as you know your property type and your market area, you can start applying market price indexing. Benefits: it clarifies the nature of how much data you've got, how good it is, and it can expand the relevant data set. In other words, you can go back further in time for a perfect comp if you've got a reliable time adjustment. And that's what this system does. It will show you. And it improves other adjustments just simply because you're more accurate right from the get-go. The rules of time adjustment analysis: you must include all the relevant data available, just like USPAP says. It must reflect the competitive sales and nothing that's not competitive, according to the GSEs, Fannie and Freddie. And you must identify, reflect the trend changes. You don't want to continue saying a market's continuing to go up when it's obviously turned down. So what is evidence-based valuation? Evidence-based valuation is a subset of data science, and then market analysis or time adjustments is a subset of EBV. It is market analysis. It builds on time adjustments. The first thing we teach, because it paints the picture of what you're doing for an appraiser visually. It blends the best of expert judgment, what an appraiser is good at, and automation, the power of computers that we have today. I know I'm talking fast here, but we've got limited time, so I'm just trying to cover all these points that would come up anyway. And the result is that it provides a transparent, reproducible product. And once you've got a reproducible product, you can actually provide a reliability score to that, which is a measure of risk. And enables other critical outputs. This is the future for the appraisal profession that can improve bank lending, risk, and even the public trust in terms of bailing out our GSCs again. It can provide that risk reliability score that I just mentioned. It can provide a rigorous market price and differentiate possibly for fundamental value. Let me dwell on this for just a second. Fundamental value is the basic value of a place to live, a place to raise your children, a place to feel safe, a place to entertain, a place to have sex. It's just and a way to build wealth, That's fundamental value. And the definition of market value is market price. Well, market price reflects all of the effects over the years going back to redlining, and as long as market price depends on that. The point I'm saying is not that appraisers need to appraise the fundamental value instead of market price, but once we understand the difference, now we can deal intelligently, politically, or even spiritually with how do we deal with this process? What's caused the wealth gap? How do we actually deal with it? And appraisers are not in a position to do that, but appraisers can help by providing the alternative value, or at least opening that door. That's all I'm saying. I want to keep out of trouble with both extreme left and extreme right here. And forecasting. We always do forecasting up to today's data value from prior sales. We can go out a little further. There's no reason we can't predict out 3 months or a year or even 5 years. Sure, the reliability gets less, but we can do it. It's no more or less reliable than the data that we've got. So we can do this adjustment mechanics with a spreadsheet, or we can do it in R. I now teach in R almost exclusively, but in the past I've taught how to do it in spreadsheets. The process is really fairly simple. You download all the data you think you'll ever need. You reduce it down to the competitive market segment, analyzing it. You could create the graph and the simple regression line and put it in the report. And so here I will switch over to a time adjustment done in R. It'll take me, well, it takes 9 seconds once I'm set up. So here we go. If I can get it on here. Can you see my screen with the R or not? Or do I need to move it over? You can see it. Okay. This is a simple, well, it's our studio is these 4 panes. I'm not going to go into that, but basically this is a quick description of how to get to market conditions. I'll read just this first paragraph, then I'm going to push the go button. This example demonstrates how quickly you can create for your data. It creates a market conditions and shows a market price trend and a calculated time adjustment. This is done in something called Quarto. And all I have to do is, well, let me show you the code just so you know that it's here. The gray boxes are the code. You don't have to write the code every time. You just steal it. You just reuse it over and over and over again. If you're
George,
yes,
George, yeah, we can't see that. If you're going over the tool itself in R, what we're seeing is the a PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, shoot. That's what I thought. Okay, let me
Oh,
see if I can't move this poop.
Mute. Select that window to show that output. You should be able to go in, and when it says share, you should be able to select the window.
Do you see it now?
Let's see. Market conditions basic.
No, it should be 4 panes.
Yes, it says title SGDS1.
Yes, that's it.
And then yeah, R is free software, and then yeah, I think we're seeing it now.
Okay, now I've got an extra thing here I've got to get rid of. Okay, so it says the title, third simplest demo.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Well, what I read was this paragraph right here.
Gotcha.
I'm zipping down through here, just a couple of comments. This is really teaching stuff, not stuff that's in an appraisal. Each of these gray boxes is code to get to that. I'm not going to go over that. The point here is, my goal here is to impress you with how fast it is once you got it. The real challenge is getting the data in. And this is done in a free package in the free R Studio, in the free R. And right here, see where my cursor is pointed, it's called render. I'm going to push that button, and then it starts to run, and hopefully it'll start showing up. It is. It shows you the table very briefly, then it'll continue on. And do you see the graph yet or not?
no.
No, the graph hasn't come up yet.
Do you see it now? No. Well, the impressive part is that took 9 seconds. Now the rest of it is how do I get it to show for you? Okay.
You just go back into share again.
There we go. Do you see a graph now?
Yeah, we see the graph now.
Okay. What I was trying to impress you with is that took 9 seconds to get to this. The graph includes your market selection, so you can see all the sales going back for 18 months here. You can see where there's any outliers that might affect. This is a neighborhood. This is not a competitive market segment. This is the neighborhood. But the graph helps you get to what's competitive and what's not. The blue line is a simple regression, straight line. The red line is also a simple regression, third order polynomial, which helps you eyes pick up on anomalies and weird stuff. In this case, these 2 outliers are pulling that red line up. Just after you've seen 10 of these as an appraiser, it gets to be very secondhand. This took 9 seconds. I can reproduce the same thing in Excel in about 6 minutes. And right here is the answer. So what's the trend for the blue line? It's a downward trend of $37 per day. So here's your first quiz. If your comp was 100 days ago, what's your time adjustment? You multiply 100 times $37. So your time adjustment is minus $3,700. It's that quick. And that particular calculation can be done in any appraisal software. They all do dollars per day now. They used to force the percentage change, which is clumsy. The graph is dollars on the y-axis, time on the x-axis measured in days, and I'm done. Thank you.
George, how strong is this as far as eliminating and mitigating bias? In the FHFA paper, it talked about how, first of all, appraisers don't use time or market conditions adjustments. And when it gets to neighborhoods of Black and brown people, it's not only not applied, which misses the boat, which goes a long way to impacting the value, but we it's just really interesting. I wanted to get your take on the level of impact that you think that it has.
Sure. Well, data science and evidence-based valuation, you got it right on the button. 80% of data science is getting the data right. So you're right on. The reason I did this, because it's quicker and shorter and impressive, especially for appraisers when they can see the result. The people that are in charge, trying to get them to adopt these simpler, straightforward methods that are academically correct and econometrically right on. Bill,
You've
back
been
me up
beating
on
this
this. Say,
drum for
yay,
almost,
George. Pardon?
you've been beating this drum for over 20 years now,
I
25. I've come in contact with it over the last 2 to 3, and studying your blogs and your information. It's just really spot on and very appropriate. And I know we've adopted it in what we're teaching, and we want. I just believe it's easier for the students that are coming in to learn how to do it the right way, as opposed to trying to retrain old dogs like myself. It's hard to pick up new information.
You
So
know what, George? I can appreciate the fact that you're trying to avoid assumptions. And I think that at some point you could possibly become complacent or um or what have you. So I feel like as an appraiser, this approach, it protects you as an appraiser, it protects us, our interests,
yes.
especially in a market where it's kind of difficult. Maybe the sales have slowed down or maybe they, sped up. The market changes so much. So
Sure.
having this right here makes things a whole lot better when you're explaining and you have the data to prove like, no, we did it this way. And here's, what the result was. So I love that, avoiding assumptions about the trends.
Well, thank you. This is the data. And by the way, I am prejudiced towards economists. They're the only ones that know how to do this right. There's a lot of amateurs out there suddenly showing with their ideas on how to do time adjustments. One article came up and showed 8 different ways to do time adjustments. And guess what? They're all different numbers. Well, will a real number please stand up? Actually, I'd like to finish answering that is this question. In my classes, what we teach on getting the data right is what we call 5 dimensions of similarity. The first dimension is property type and property rights. If it's a house, you want to compare to houses. Property type, transaction, contract stuff, the motivation of the buyer and the seller, and any financing influences. Time, this is what we're talking about here. They're doing this graph on the time adjustment. Then location adjustments, when you do have to go out of the immediate neighborhood into another neighborhood, but it's a better comp. And then finally, what I call preference functions. They're everything else that's not easy. I prefer a purple kitchen, not this ugly yellow one. It becomes very personal, very hard, practically impossible to measure. But by using this evidence-based valuation, you get it down to the point where the answer almost just jumps out at you, and you don't need those trivial color of the door type of questions.
Well, I think it's very good, George. I see why Thaddeus is so excited and has been so excited about the work that you're doing. Couple of questions. So the source of the pricing information, where does that data come from?
This is all MLS.
MLS, okay. MLS database. Gotcha.
Sure. Sometimes the price they give you may be wrong. There might be concessions in there or fine something. That's dimension number 2, the transaction contract stuff.
And certainly, I guess I'm surprised. Is this not currently being used to do? Is this not the way you do appraisals right now? Why wouldn't this be preferred to, putting your thumb in the air or your finger in the air and kind of trying to figure it out?
Well, Bill, I've been asking that question for 20 years.
No kidding. Wow.
I've been trying to give this stuff away for at least 15 years. And I will put some bureaucracies, everything from the Appraisal Institute to the Appraisal Standards Board to the GSEs. The GSEs say you must have a time adjustment, but they don't enforce it. So if they don't enforce it, but they don't really enforce it on appraisers, they enforce it on the banks. And if the banks don't want to do it, the lenders don't want to do it, don't enforce, nobody does it. And of course, then it gets lost. Nobody knows how to do it because we haven't done it in 20 years.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
I think the other part of that is that as appraisers, pretty much your growth stops once you get your license. Nobody uses continuing education to continue to learn. We use continuing education to continue to check the box. I'm just as guilty as everybody else. I wait to the last minute, and then we're just rushing for hours, and we're pointing and clicking, trying to get to the hours. But I think if we could do a better job of not only modernizing the appraisal process, we could definitely eliminate the bias and close the wealth gap. But if appraisers would pay more attention and be more intentional in their own professional development, I think we could go a long way. Right now, the appraisers have post-traumatic stress and are under attack. And we have to do a better job of standing up for our profession, standing up for each other, because it's empirical. And I think what the new rules allowing appraisal waivers is relying upon the automated valuation models. But one of the downfalls of the automated valuation models, and I'll let you weigh in on, George, is one of the things that Shonnie said is the evidence. And with the daily time adjustment, measuring the velocity of change and when it changes is where the shortcoming is of the appraisal valuation models. So if appraisers are well trained, they will always have a place and be able to find work, because there's certain things that the AVMs just won't be able to do.
Absolutely.
You know what, George? I was thinking about that. Like you mentioned the banks and the lenders, if they are not pushing back on this, if they're saying that, oh, the report that we have is fine, we don't care about what you guys are doing when it comes to, improvement with the education, then how do you encourage an appraiser to learn, to get that skill set, to learn that knowledge? Someone has to do something different.
Absolutely.
To have an improved product. So where do we start? Do we just start with encouraging the appraisers to, hey, take the courses that matter, that's going to help you to be sharper, and then present this really great product to your client, the lender, the bank?
Right. And who's doing those reviews at the appraisal management companies or the banks? They're reviewers who used to be appraisers, or they're running it through this automated intelligence sort of a thing. And literally some of them are sending these off to India to workers there to do. And okay, well, wait a minute, but that's in violation of USPAP. Well, no, it's not, because they are not licensed. They don't care. They call it what we used to call administrative review rather than appraisal review. And yet all the actions of a true appraisal review, those people are jumping on, why didn't you use this comparable? Well, this method here, it's already there. It hits you right between the eyes. This is the data.
George, I think you said a mouthful. I think that you have non-appraisers and people that don't have to follow USPAP doing administrative reviews and automated reviews, and you don't have subject matter experts. And everybody gets to question and throw darts at the appraiser and poke holes in what he's done, but they have no clue of what they're talking about. They go on what's what comes up in the 15, 20, 25% logarithms when they're outside. And if there's something that's outside of the box and not being able to be explained, they don't have an idea of what to do next. What I would like to do as we close is hear from Bill from an economist standpoint on the reliability of what George talked about and how it impacts.
Well, that's why, thank you, Thaddeus. And thank you, George, for sharing this. that's why I asked about the data sources. Given that you're using MLS, the most consistent, broadest data source, I think it's useful. This is definitely useful, a useful approach. Also, given that you're just using regression, price versus time, among the MLS data points that you have, no argument there either. Now you opened by asking me to opine on analytical bias versus personal bias. So let me take a second and mention how that plays in here. Analytical bias for me refers to the statistical tools that I'm comfortable with, that I've used forever, that I'm willing to put to task in this sort of thing. Personal bias relates to my personal database of information on neighborhoods, housing. Oh, I know that house isn't worth $200,000, because I just know it, because, I just know it. That to me is a sign of one of the factors of personal bias. I think George's approach stands a very good chance of helping to eliminate both of those types of bias factors. But here's the bottom line. The reason why this isn't being used is because institutions don't want it to be used. They're comfortable keeping property valuations exactly the way they are, because they damage certain communities and benefit other communities. That's kind of the bottom line here. So getting this fully utilized, I think will require a law. It certainly will require a regulation at the Fed, FDIC, OCC, FHFA, and the GSEs to utilize this type of a simple regression equation that would come a lot closer to actually establishing a valuation. And then the other question is, does the Department of Justice use this when they are looking for instances of discriminatory valuation processes or redlining, or so that's another thing that I'd certainly want to do. I'd want to take a look at Black neighborhoods versus white neighborhoods, run the regressions across those geographies, and then come back and take a look at the differences in valuations. Finally, the other thing I would love to see the exact same structure in two different neighborhoods, a white neighborhood versus a Black neighborhood. And I'd like to see that difference, and kind of continue to report on that. As a matter of fact, there should be, George, I'm going to task you with something else. I mean, one thing you might want to do is you might want to create a appraisal discrimination index that shows and the reason I'm thinking about this is your date sale coefficient with the dollars per day. I looked at that and I said, well, hey, I wonder if you ran that for all properties across Black and white neighborhoods, if you could come up with a metric that would show you what the average difference is, the average unfair difference is in appraisals in Black neighborhoods versus white neighborhoods. And
Bill,
simply,
that's one of the things that we are actually working on with the students actually doing the research. And we were going to ask George to help us put that together. And he's already helped us working on the market analysis courses. So these are the things that the students can allow and do research in order to move forward to know the difference. Because again, over 65% of the industry is over 50. So these students will be coming along. They will be equipped to deal with this. And part of the research that we have them doing right now for our report that'll be coming out at the beginning of the year are these sort of things that we will be tasking George with, trying to help us pull together in a coherent environment, especially even with the conversations that I had with you and your interns a few weeks back was extremely beneficial, and they have some brilliant minds. And we were talking about how we can close the wealth gap by updating the valuation model. And I believe we can close it by 10% within 10 years. they seem to think we can do it faster than that. So it's nice, healthy discussion on how we move the ball forward, modernizing the appraisal process, eliminating bias, and closing out the wealth gap. So,
As you know, I tend to agree with my interns. They think you can do it. I mean, think about it. If you were to go through the entire United States of America and do the evaluation for each and every property, you certainly could come up with the exact metric that you need in order to adjust valuations so as to eliminate racial bias. If you're able to do that, you would significantly increase Black wealth instantaneously, assuming, of course, that Black properties are appraised at a lower level than comparable white properties, which I believe is the case. I believe that is actually a reflection of the current situation. No, you could probably get a 25% bump in Black wealth instantaneously were you to be able to do this. But the other thing to keep in mind is that with these changes in the administration and with the political situation, there is less of an incentive to calculate that differential now. Remember, all of the anti-DEI, anti-Black arguments are bad faith arguments. Bad faith arguments. They're based on some lack of different, they're based on George's differential not existing. So there's no difference between Black appraisals and white appraisals, even though, we all know that there are, but those arguments are based on some fantasy world where these differentials don't actually exist. So you got to keep that in mind as you move forward as well. So I hope that's helpful.
so I want to thank everybody. Shonnie, I'm gonna let you close out because I know we've all, all the criticisms that have come back is that we don't give you enough air. So I want to
Ah,
give you the air to close this
thank
out,
you,
and then we'll
audience.
be closing this out, and then we'll be going to segment 2. So I'm gonna do a new link after this, and we'll let Rick do the editing. But Shonnie, I'm gonna let you close this out.
I believe that using time adjustments, doing some improved appraisal reports with educated appraisers will benefit everybody. And I feel like as a broker, I feel like the seller, who's my client sometimes, the buyer, who's my client sometimes, would really appreciate that, because now it's not just this skewed appraisal reviews anymore. It's something that people are really putting forth the effort to make things fair. And so I believe that we really need to push this education. I love the fact that we have our young folks learning and they're just ready to go for it. Thad mentioned that appraisers are older. So the young people have that energy. They want to do things right. They want to learn. I'm really excited about that. And I really love your presentation, George. Thank you so much for that information.
Thank you.
So
There's going to be a
like
lot of
us, review us, subscribe. We need all the help we can get. The goal is to get to 10,000 and eliminating appraisal bias through data science. We had a nice, robust conversation for part 1. We're here back with part 2 with my esteemed colleagues, Shonnie Alridge, William Michael Cunningham, who we affectionately refer to as Bill, and George Dell, the godfather of data science. George, we just see your name right now. We don't see you on camera.
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I was
Like
hiding. I was hiding. I didn't want you to see below the waist.
Well, we'll go ahead and get started and jump right into it. We had a really exciting conversation before. Been able to work Shonnie in more. I see you just taking the mic, Shonnie, jumping in there, fighting for your right. Okay. And it was well appreciated. What I wanted to do this time now is to further and continue the conversation. One of the things that George, I know you detest the 1004 MC form and all its inadequacies. I just think it's a good transition for people to be able to use market analysis who aren't quite prepared to learn R. And I think it's a good placeholder until the new generation comes in who knows our inside and out with the market analysis that you've actually demonstrated. So I know you don't like it, but I think it's better than using nothing at all. Jump in there, Bill.
So please explain the form that you referenced. And if you have a link to an example of it, that would be helpful.
Okay. It's the 1004 Fannie Mae Market Conditions Report, which they started using a few years back in order to do everything that George talked about to address market conditions and time adjustments. It's just the appraisers resisted using it so much and everybody got tired of fighting, so they stopped using it. How long ago did they stop using it, George?
When did they stop using it?
Yep.
Well, Fannie and Freddie stopped requiring it, I'm thinking about 3 years ago.
And it was just it just had a short runway. It was less than 2 years that it was actually being applied. And it was just too much resistance and too much pushback. However, it did allow you to pay some attention to the market and all of the sales in the market that were relevant. But some of its fallacies was if you put the wrong information in, you could massage the information or you could use it to be misleading. And because a lot of people didn't take the time to actually understand the market analysis, its effectiveness was really kind of watered down. You're muted, Bill.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's helpful. I was wondering if Department of Justice used data from that form in any of their redlining or housing discrimination lawsuits.
I
I
doubt it.
would
The
doubt it.
industry barely used it when it was accessible. And again, it gets back to people not knowing how to do different things and not being trained properly. Some of the stuff and work that we've done in the process in newer neighborhoods where there have been different rehab projects, like we did with the Cincinnati Port Authority and then the Oklahoma Black Research Project, where they were doing rehab in different areas, but they were concerned about the properties coming in undervalued. And all we did was utilize the cost approach with the sales comparison approach, and then you can reconcile between the two approaches to value. And the cost approach, because the cost is so high, it automatically elevated what was going on. And if you reconcile between the two approaches, you can get a more accurate value type, which is reliable and acceptable. However, nobody knows how to do the cost approach anymore because it hasn't been required in several years.
I'd
Okay.
like to go back and answer Bill's question a little bit more about the 1004 MC market conditions. Basically, it would go back a year's worth of data. It specifically used the word neighborhood, not competitive market segment. And it grouped the data in terms of time. It would go back 3 months, and then the 3 months before that, and then the 6 months before that. So that was one of the more obvious objections to it, is the groups were uneven. Also, as you probably know, when you're grouping time data, you're pretending that all the sales take place at the midpoint of that. So if you started from January 1st to March 31st, you're pretending all the sales took place on February 15th, which is, well, it's stupid. It's called, in statistics, it's called data discarding. You're throwing away perfectly good data. You got the exact date that it sold, and you're discarding it. Well, here's the real problem is if you're taking two sales model matches right next door to each other, one sold March 31st, the other one sold April 1st, one day apart, and suddenly you're applying a time adjustment to that is 3 months of change. It's a bad graph. It's a bad assumptions for the application. It's biased. It's not racially biased. It's analytically biased. And when I say analytically biased, it can be either up or down, too high or too low. When I say racially biased, well, you know what that is. I mean, it depends on that situation.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you for that, George. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, George, one of the things that it does do, though, is give you median days on market. So when it's measuring the median days on market, that also dictates when it's time to make that market conditions adjustment. So again, I think that it's better than nothing and something that's readily available. I understand what you're saying, but if the market days, the market on days tells you when it's time to make that adjustment. So if the median days on market is 15 days, then everything over 15 days needs to be adjusted for that particular market.
Yeah, see, you got me stymied here because I don't know how to answer that. Now we're trying to adjust for the error bias that's in the analytical method to begin with. How do we adjust for the bad analysis? Well, yeah.
Again,
That's my attitude. I got a bad attitude here.
Well, no, it's not about attitude. I appreciate the conversation around it and just the viewpoint and having a better understanding. You are by far when it comes to the market analysis and valuation ahead of the game, and I've learned so much from you. My whole goal is to be able to empower the next generation in order to get it right. So while we're in the process of training them now, that is a critical part of it. And you teaching R and our studio and what's the new R that's coming out that's got in the beta phase?
Well, it's the new user interface. In the past, it's primarily been RStudio, which is excellent. The new one is just in beta testing version right now. It's called Positron.
Yeah, Positron. That's what I was thinking about. And so if they start now, by the time they get to Positron, it's just a matter of upgrading. And the beauty of it is it goes beyond market analysis. You can use that same market analysis for bedrooms, square footage, all the different factors that when you ask appraisers to tell you how they came up with these adjustments, they go and start telling that lie that they use a paired data analysis that has been in effect since the beginning of the century, and nobody is really doing it. It's just that age old thing that we tend to use, and because people don't have the ability or you don't have subject matter experts doing these reviews, these are the kind of things that slip through the cracks unsubstantiated.
You know what's really interesting is that in the real estate sales world, we use contracts, and our contracts are updated literally every year. And they're updated based on situations that have taken place over the year. And so the contracts are in place to protect parties involved and to address issues that could possibly come up. And so we're talking about a form. This is just one of them, but a form that should be looked at, evaluated, and updated, and it hasn't been. That's a problem for me. And I'm glad that George feels a way about it, because although it's a great form and it's been useful for this long duration, it could stand some adjustments.
Shonnie, that's an excellent point, because I'm sitting here looking at the Freddie Mac Form 71. It was updated March 2009.
And the reality is they don't mind, we say they, but they don't mind updating it. This is great, but maybe it should be, looked upon as doing something a little bit more frequently.
Well, they got a new form that's coming out, and it's out now, and it'll be coming into use in 2026. It'll be mandatory. But the old Freddie Mac Form 70 that they use for the UAD was dated 2005, and it was updated in 2011.
Okay, so we got a little update. Thank you for the update. We'll take what we can get, but I don't know.
Now let me ask you, because and not to cut you off, Shonnie.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
The results of the data collected on these forms to date, where can I get that? Can I go to Fannie or Freddie and pull all of the data.
Oh yeah, that was part of what the whole goal was for the UAD data set. So they can isolate a price per square foot for any zip code in the country.
Right, right.
That is the impetus for them going to the appraisal waiver. They feel that they've got enough data now that they can utilize, and they've been collecting this data since 2011, and it's all been going into this computer database. So yeah, you can get that now. And the other thing that they've been doing is utilizing data collectors. So the data collectors can measure and take a picture of the house. That is another thing that we have teaching our students to be able to do. So they'll be able to do the whole thing from soup to nuts. They'll be able to measure a house, utilizing ANSI standards to be data collectors. And most appraisers don't want to be data collectors. Who wants to go from $600, $700 an appraisal report to $100, $150, $200 tops to be a data collector? And that's where the whole industry is right now. So it's really interesting and to see how things have gone. And it's one of the only industries where fees have been suppressed and appraisers are really suffering. And the models that they have now with the appraisal management companies, it's just really done a disservice to the industry. And instead of getting the most competent appraiser, they want to use the cheapest appraiser.
Cheapest.
And then they want to say you need to have core competency or neighborhood competency. Well, if you utilize what George is teaching with the data science and evidence-based analysis, you become an analyst. And analyst, you're looking at the information. You're removing the subjectivity from the whole process. So again, being culturally competent in a particular neighborhood is, I'm gonna have to call bullshit on that.
Dad up here cussing and carrying
I'm
on.
sorry, I've been working on that. I haven't cussed in so long. I'm sorry, that was just muscle
It's
memory.
the passion. It's okay. You're passionate.
Hopefully Rick will be able to edit
Look at
that out.
George.
Well, so what should we do? What can we do? What should we do? George, I'm interested in your opinion on that next step. I mean, obviously the goal is to have far more accurate appraisals that exist without racial or analytical bias so that we have a better sense for true valuation. But we know that there are a number of institutions standing in the way of that because, there are people who benefit from this current lack of accurate assessment and appraisal data that's out there. So is there anything in particular that we should do? And I'm going to say certainly as Black people, because we know that we are impacted more by this differential than any other group in the country.
Yes. Well, answering your question is really not easy because it's very, very in depth in terms of bureaucracies and habits and all that. I'd like to start with the good news is the GSEs at least are saying that they want better accuracy and precision. I was scheduled to do an interview with Lyle Radke with Fannie Mae later this week. Unfortunately, he had a family issue that will prevent him doing that this week. So we're rescheduling that. And I found, well, specifically Lyle, I found he's all about facts and logic and evidence, at least on that level, it's absolutely there. The bad news is what I call the 5 frictions. And I'm not going to give you a solution. I'm going to give you the depth of the problem. It's the 5 frictions are current education, regulations, USPAP, habit, and a part of USPAP, which is client user expectations. Education And I was very briefly, my history with the Appraisal Institute. At one point, this is like running almost 20 years ago now, I was on the National Board of Directors, I was on the curriculum committee, and I was on the technology committee. And I thought, oh, baby, I'm going to make a change in the world now. Wrong. Wrong.
That's
The
terrible.
system beat me down. Uh, and it's really not changed since then. If you, and I'm picking on the Appraisal Institute because I'm still a loyal member. I still feel the Appraisal Institute has the best opportunity to turn this profession around and do a service to the public trust. I
Okay.
still believe that. However, it's
I
not
would have to
happening.
adamantly disagree with you, Alan.
Oh boy.
Well, okay. It's
You
my
know,
turn, that is. The
we can agree to
organization's there.
disagree on that one.
The education continues to be what was first developed in the 1930s and the 1940s. Pick 3 comps, make adjustments. Now there's been a few changes like the discounted cash flow thing. Certainly a lot of talk about using more data, but we don't have anybody like Bill who says, well, here's how you deal with data. Well, that's called data science. Data science is about dealing with large amounts of data instead of picking 3 comps.
George, how do you change an organization that refuses to change? The closest thing they had to change was Cindy Chance, and they fired her. So, again, how do you expect us to trust them with change when they don't want to change?
Well, let's be clear. I did not ask you to trust them. I just think simply because the organization is there, sometimes it's possible to turn an aircraft carrier in a slightly different direction. Can it happen? I don't know. I have no idea. There's still hope there. Okay, anyway, the education is friction number 1. Friction number 2 is just habit and expectation. Let's call it groupthink. This is the way we do it. This is the way we've always done it. This is the way I was trained to do it. This is what is expected of me. Hey, and I got to get this appraisal out and done so I can make my $300 and move on. Second friction then is the habits, the just play human resistance to change. Regulations. We got this regulatory structure that is incredibly difficult. We've got USPAP, we've got the appraisal subcommittee, we've got the Appraisal Foundation, we've got the Appraisal Institute, we've got 50 states and 4 jurisdiction, all of which have different ways and different levels and different understandings of enforcing things, including licensing. But here's an effect that is really not thought of except for people like me. I teach a very limited amount of curriculum, basically the data science stuff. I'm competing with companies out there that teach 20, 30 classes of stuff that's a repeat over and over again. They don't have to develop anything new, nothing critical. For me, it's a big deal. It costs close to $6,000 to get approval for 1 4-hour class in all the states. It's prohibitive. I can't do that in one.
I think it's closer to 6 or 7, George, from what our estimates are and what we're incurring at this point to get our appraisal apprenticeship up and running. So
sure.
It's the cost, and then to have fresh content like you have and what you've helped us to develop, but that's what's necessary in order to change and get the necessary results. I believe it is the government's responsibility to do this, because as we have encountered travel in the country, this is bigger than a black-white problem. This is an America problem. The federal government is losing trillions of dollars a year due to outdated fee schedules going across federal land. The Native Americans are losing trillions of dollars a year due to outdated fee schedules going across their land. There was just a public case solved this past summer with BNSF Railroad and the Swinomish tribe in Washington State. That was a $400 million settlement in one state. And the only reason that fee schedule had been posted since 1991. The only reason this was found out was because the train crashed. Had the train not crashed, they would have kept shipping all those barrels of oil across Native American land and not paying for them. So I think this is an opportunity for us to make a difference. I believe we can increase the gross domestic product by 10%. We can reduce the national debt by 10% just by updating the valuation model and having accurate values across the country. This is what me and Bill and his interns were discussing during my time with them in DC. And this is what I've been talking about with our interns as well. So.
Okay, let me continue on with the other restrictions. So we covered education and regulations, and those regulations are based primarily on USPAP, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, which state the appraiser must use established methods. It doesn't say the best methods are the most reliable. And the key word in all of USPAP is credibility. You say, well, that's fine. That's a good word. But the definition of credibility or credible in USPAP, it's right there on the front words section, is worthy of belief. Now, cynical George says, aha, a best qualification for being an appraiser is being a good used car salesman. Worthy of belief. Yes, this is a wonderful car. Yes, this is a wonderful appraisal. Those days are past, in my opinion. We've got the data, we've got the analytics, we've got the computer power. So education, regulations, USPAP, habit, we've talked about that. And finally, a part of USPAP says in a proper scope of work, the appraiser must come, the test of acceptability of scope of work is client expectations. Is the appraiser doing what the client expected? And if I was a defense attorney for appraisers, I would say the client expected me to come in with this value, and I did it. I complied with USPAP. So those are the 5: education, regulations, USPAP, habit, and that's client expectations is a requirement for scope of work. Acceptable scope of work are the exact words. How do we get away from that? I'll turn that over to Thaddaus. All you can do is poke and prod little parts of this. You choose which of these you want to go after. I do what I do. That's all I can do is try to bring the truth to the table.
Well, and I appreciate your efforts in bringing the truth to the table. I appreciate the time that you spent with me, educating me on data science and evidence-based valuation. I believe for us in the 10K 10,000 Minority Appraisers Foundation, it is going to be imperative for our students to be able to learn this because there's so many ways that it is impacted. So we can utilize this in urban and rural valuations. So when you have sparse data, so if we start to examine all of the ways that minorities lose value, we can look at, we lose $200 billion a year in undervaluation in housing. We lose another $100 billion a year in undervaluation through heirs property. Then we lose an additional $100 billion a year through Black farmers and their loss of value. So we have been working on all these fronts and we have visited all of these places. Our outreach is second to none. And going through our year and looking at all the places that we've been and touched, and I've been to all of them, and Shonnie's probably been to 99% of them with me. It was kind of overwhelming. It was like having an out-of-body experience when I looked at what we've been able to do and accomplish. I'm very proud of that work and the number of people that we've been able to impact and the number of people that we will continue to be able to impact with developing this appraisal apprenticeship program. First and foremost, this has never been done. It's cutting edge. And so to be able to get the repetitions in appraising and to be able to get paid while you learn is kind of groundbreaking and mitigates some of the factors in people being able to enter into the profession with realistic goals and realistic and achievable outcomes. So again, we keep on hammering on this public trust, and I feel like a lot of times they're using the public trust as a punchline. But as we tour our ag communities and our 1890 communities, and Black farmers and Hispanic farmers come up to me and they are excited and crying about they've never had anybody speaking to them for them. That's what gives us energy, and it's just very needed and necessary. And with our Native American brothers and sisters as well. So again, when we started this charge, it was about Black people. But as we started to travel the country, for me, it's about everybody, and being able to partner with Bill to get the economic impact, being able to partner with you, George, to learn the market analysis, how to address this through a very analytic, data science, evidence-based standpoint, and to be able to work with Shonnie, who is just a hero in the field, and the kids love her. Everybody loves Shonnie. So
I'd like to tie into what you just said there, if I can.
absolutely.
I find, first of all, I find that young people really take to what we teach much faster. They're used to computers and they're used to that. They see it as different than the old way. Trust me, I know a good comp when I see one approach. Number two is I've seen almost a hypocrisy here in all the alleged let's help minorities get into this profession, which is dying. You know, Fannie and Freddie are using more and more AVMs, more and more waivers of the rules, even the recent FHA. So wait a minute, why are we doing this? Are we creating yet another problem? With evidence-based valuation, it goes beyond my opinion of value 2 weeks ago. It goes to forecasting. It goes to that fundamental value, which we talked about, that can differentiate between real and unreal bias. There's opportunity there. You can do real-time analysis if it's auditable. Your precision of a human expert assisted gets better than an AVM, which is all secret anyway. That's really all I want to say. There's an opportunity here to not feed into a dying profession, but to a new one which requires the human touch, which the young people are adept at and comfortable with. They like it, and it'll be a true service. Yeah, the easy appraisals, valuations are going to continue on. That's fine. But the hard ones, we need people who can be trusted and know what the heck they're doing.
So, George, to your point, what's dying is the old way of doing things. So the profession isn't dying. I believe the profession is evolving with the recent lawsuit with NAR. And so brokers will need to be more analytical, and appraisers will need to be more analytical to be able to be of add value. So in order to do that, that is where we are positioning our folks at 10K to be successful and be able to evolve with the change and be at the forefront of the change. Because again, the profession as we know it is dying out. But if you are able to increase your skill set through data science, there's always going to be a place for you. And what we're doing now is doing our research. So first week of this year, we're hammering out the date now. We'll be able to release our 10K Closing the Wealth Gap Project 2025 report. So I'm super excited about that. Working with Bill on some of those economic analysis, and that's some of the stuff that we have the students working on. Shonnie's been incredible. We've been doing a boatload with heirs property training to be able to empower Black and minority farmers across the country, as well as Black and urban heirs properties. So that's been really huge. I'm excited to be working with the Policy Center out of Alcorn State. I'm also excited to be working with the Heirs Property Center out of South Carolina. So this has just been a labor of love, and to sit around and talk about all this stuff with George and Bill is just an absolute pleasure. And I'm just full of gratitude that you all have taken out the time to give me conversation and help us to articulate this thing to be able to move this whole thing forward.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I can second that. Thank you very much for your work in this area and for introducing me to this all-star grouping of people that have been working on some of the same areas. So I've got to hop though. I'll look forward for the edits. I hope they can kind of edit my picture out when I wasn't speaking because I was kind of nodding off there a little bit. Long night. It's a long story with the interns leaving and with school kind of coming to a close. I got a bunch of grades that I have to give out. So that's what I've been doing. But at any rate, go ahead.
You. I appreciate it. We'll like us, subscribe to us, follow us, 10kminorityappraisers.org. I'm sure Rick will take care of all of this in all the streaming and editing. Look for our upcoming podcast with our interns who will be interviewing who is why we do this for. So I'd like to thank you all again for showing up, and I look forward to working with you all in the future.